Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. The look on the faces of the Silent Sisters made Jon grateful for their vow of silence. They asked no questions, which meant he told no lies in response. He was semi-naked, laid out on a trestle table in a recovery tent, with his shirt open to reveal the stitched-up stab wounds inflicted by his former brothers of the Watch. Silent they may have been, but he could tell what they were thinking. That he had jeopardized his life for the sake of winning a bit of glory in a jousting match. That he was mad and vainglorious in equal measure. Had they been able, they would be chastising him soundly as they dabbed at his cuts and scratches. In a way, watching these women exchange dark and disapproving looks among themselves was even worse. "It's not as bad as it looks," he stated. In response, one of the women pressed a finger to her lips. A signal that he was expected to lie down and shut up. Deciding it was best not to labor the point, he did as they asked. Flat on his back, all he could do was look up at the peaked roof of the tent and think back on the real identity of the Mystery Knight. Benjen was the first to his side, quickly followed by Eddard. Brandon was training for the melee, which left only Lyanna. He had been knocked out of the saddle by a girl younger than himself. "Ouch!" he yelped, as a Silent Sister dabbed a stinging ointment into an open graze. But once that was done, it seemed his treatment was complete. Relieved, he hoisted himself up again, and sat on the edge of the table to button up his shirt. Before long, people with far more serious injuries than his own would be flooding into these recovery tents, and he had no desire to be taking up valuable space. "Anything serious?" Jolted out of his own thoughts, Jon looked up to see Eddard pushing his way through the tent flaps. Just cuts and bruises. Ned approached him, stopping at the foot of the table and leaning against it. "Seeing as it's you, I'm sure Leah will let you have your horse and armor back without ransom." So, it was Lyanna. Jon laughed aloud, making his bruised ribs hurt in the process. Suddenly wincing, he gingerly eased himself down off the table's edge and back to his feet. "Did you know she was planning this?" Ned shrugged. "I knew she would do something to get revenge against those squires who beat Lord Howland, but I didn't think it would be this." If Ned disapproved, he did not show it. He came to Jon's side, offering a strong shoulder to lean on as they made their way back outside. But once he was on his feet and the initial shock of pain wore off and his strength wore off, he found he was able to walk quite well. "I really should have guessed, though," Ned added. "It's just like Lyanna to do something like this. If our father hears about it, he'll be furious. But Leah will talk him round, just as she always does. And she'll come up smelling as sweet as a winter rose. It's the same every time." Jon couldn't help but smile as he recognized that familiar pattern. It was one that would be played out again between that same quietly resigned lord and his own willful younger daughter, Arya. But no matter how much he wished he could say something, his foreknowledge was kept firmly locked inside. The two of them emerged into the sunlight of the false spring, just as the crowds erupted in cheers for a victor, and a smattering of boos for the defeated. Jon could not see who was competing, but he heard the compere calling the Mystery Knight and a competitor from House Hay. Ned jolted, suddenly grabbing Jon around the arm and waist to help him get moving faster. "Come on," he urged him. "We can't miss this. If she beats Hay, then she's up against Blount tomorrow morning." Desire to see his aunt taking on a real knight spurred him on despite the stings and aches caused by moving too fast. Both he and Ned scrambled up the stands, barging through spectators and apologizing to everyone whose feet they trod on in the press. The Stark's place in the stands gave them an unimpeded view down the length of the tilt yard, where already they could see Lyanna couching her lance. Then, just as the destroyers were being moved into a place, Jon felt someone leaning right down from the tier above and close to his ear. He turned to find Rhaegar Targaryen directly behind him, kneeling so they could speak privately. "That's your young lord, isn't it?" he asked. "I think we all underestimated that one. Hack's bound to knock him out now, though. Just you watch." Jon went to reply, but his words were cut off by the man at Rhaegar's left. He twisted his neck a little more, getting the other man in focus. It was King Daenerys, leaning back in his seat and watching over the joust with a disdainful eye while addressing his son. "I see you there, whispering in another man's ears. Don't think I don't know what you're up to. You ungrateful shit," he drawled almost lazily. "Remember, I have another son now." His words were threatening, but Rhaegar's response was resigned to the point of bored, as if he had heard all this 100 times before, where Jon would have fallen into line immediately. Brazier didn't bat an eyelid. He never lets me forget I have a brother now, he whispered, rolling his indigo eyes. All of a sudden, I am expendable. Reuzer's forgotten as the charge began. Reuzer spread his arm around the back of Jon's seat, both of them leaning forward as the knights drew closer and closer. If they blinked, they would have missed it, but the crash resounded, and Hyde was thrown bodily from the saddle, landing in the sand and rolling over several times before the groundsman stopped him. Lyanna had triumphed once more, bringing a roar of approval from the stands. Benjen, Jon, and Ned were both on their feet, applauding with everyone else. He glanced behind him, noting Reuzer was also part of the standing ovation. As soon as things calmed down and Jon resumed his seat, he turned to face Rhaega again. What was that you were saying about underestimation again? Your Grace? To his relief, Riker laughed. Just for a moment, his sad eyes lightened. How old did you say your man was again? But before Jon could answer, the prince's attention was caught by someone else making their way along the stands. Oh, gods, here comes that mad wandering crow again. You know, he tried to recruit me this morning. I don't think he knew who I was. Jon noticed the same man who had tried to recruit him the day before last. If nothing else, he had to admire the man's determination and cheery enthusiasm. So you don't fancy giving up all your titles, inheritance, and future realm for the sake of a life in the frozen north, your grace? The prince snorted, choking back laughter. As brave as our brothers of the Night's Watch are, I fear I must eschew. What did I just say to you? Aerys cut over his son once more, then turned to Jon. He raised one hand, showing his uncut yellowing nails. Don't think I won't be watching you from now on either. Whoever you are, we're discussing the jousts, father, Rogier pointed out, firmly. Not everything we do is about you. Then Jon noticed Princess Elia flinch and turned to Riker with a look of mute appeal in her eyes. It wasn't her husband she was afraid of, after all. He realized it was her father-in-law. Jon could see it now. She was terrified of Aerys and looked to Riker for protection. Something he mercifully remembered, and after a firm pat on Jon's back, he rejoined his wife and put a protective arm around her shoulders. Meanwhile, Aerys used one of his horrendous fingernails to pick at a scab on his left forearm while regarding the mystery knight with a look of deepest loathing. How? Benjen, careful. Ouch. Damn you and your hands of clay. Lyanna's voice rang shrill, barely muted by the door that separated her from Jon and Ned, who lingered in the corridor outside. The two men leaned in closer, trying not to laugh at the girl's plight. She had returned to their rooms after hiding her armor, covered in scrapes, scratches, and bruises. Jon suspected she had also cracked a few ribs into the bargain. Although she initially disagreed with him, it sounded like Lyanna was changing her mind. If she still competes tomorrow, she is insane, Ned whispered, ear to the keyhole of the door. Jon had to agree. She's down for 2 more rounds against Blunt and Frey. Come morning, all those bruises and cuts will be out in force. It's always worse the morning after, Ned agreed. But you try telling her that when her blood is up, stubbornness will get her through it, just you watch. However, Lyanna emerged from the chamber an hour later looking every inch the lady. Her hair had been combed to a shine, and her new gown was an immaculate vision of silver and pale blue silk. Diamond earrings hung from her ears, reaching midway down her neck, and the black eye was concealed with white powder, blended with a little rouge paste derived from the sap of a heart tree. It was only when she walked, with a stiff gait and a barely hidden limp, that her day's exertions showed. Right, let's feast, she said brightly. Ned remained skeptical. Are you sure? Oh, stop worrying, brother, she chided. She then lowered her voice, adding in a whisper, everything must be normal, no one can suspect a thing. Remember, and not a word to Brandon. You know what a bragger he is? Or rather, Jon suspected. She was worried Brandon would tell Robert, who would then tell everyone else. This was a secret that had to be between the 4 of them, and when they met Brandon outside the hall where the night's feast was to be held, they were all relieved he noticed nothing amiss about his sister's appearance. He linked his arm through hers and led her inside to where their table was set up near the dais. Afterwards, Lyanna even got up to dance with Benjen and then Jon himself, both of them taking the dance slowly, while ensuring it was enough to make everything appear normal. It seemed to do the trick. If anyone noticed anything amiss, no one said anything. As they circled the room, Jon spotted Rhaegar dancing with Princess Elia, each holding the other tenderly. But once the dance was done, The princess had tired and made her way to the side of the room. Deciding now was a good time to catch up with Bran, Jon also excused himself, inadvertently following in Elia's footsteps as though he were deliberately following her. After a minute, she noticed and stopped. "Hello?" she said, turning to face him. Up close, Jon could see he had been dismissive of her. She wasn't plain, just delicate. Like her whole being, her features were small and not fully appreciated from afar. "Your Grace," he replied, inclining his head respectfully. "Forgive me, I wasn't following you. I was just going to take some air." "Me too," she replied, raising a smile. "Do you mind if I join you? It seems my lady-in-waiting is busy with your brother." Jon was mystified. "My brother?" He glanced around the room and spotted Ned shrinking into a corner all on his own, while Brandon was chatting in the ear of Ashara Dane. Jon realized the princess's mistake. "Oh, he's not my brother. I'm just squiring for the Starks." He actually blushed. "Forgive me, but you look so much alike. Anyway, if you're busy or there's someone else you're waiting for, never mind, I can manage by myself." "No, please, I like the company too," Jon quickly assured her. It would be an inconvenience, but seeing as Bran wasn't expecting him, it would not matter if he deferred a visit to the godswood. Still, he rather hoped that Lady Ashara would be finished with Brandon by the time he escorted Yale outside. However, when he looked back, he saw Lady Ashara approaching Eddard and whispering something in his ear that made him blush to the roots of his hair. Clumsily, Ned got up and they joined hands and approached the dance floor together. Once outside in the open air, Elia closed her eyes and drew a deep breath. As though savoring the very air, most people breathed without thinking twice about it. As Jon studied her, he thought she resembled an animal freed from a trap. A soft wind plucked at her long brown hair, fanning it out against her narrow shoulders. "That's better," she said, opening her eyes again. "Gods, it gets hot in that hall." Unsure of where to look, Jon turned his face away from her as she leaned against a low stone wall to let the breeze fan her face and neck. Eventually, it seemed she was recovered enough to walk. The terrace lined the Hall of the 100 Hearths, and they could be seen through the glass windows, so it felt less improper at least. Still, he worried. "Prince Rhaegar won't mind this, will he?" he asked, nervously. "Of course not," she replied, as if it were a small matter. "And that was the end of it. I noticed you on the first night. Do you remember? You looked right at me, but when I met your eyes, you looked away like you were all embarrassed. Later, I asked Lady Ashara to bring you over to me, but you shied away again, it seems." Jon was embarrassed that she even remembered his rude staring. "I'm sorry, I was just curious." She looked at him and smiled. "Curiosity isn't a crime. Now tell me your name." "I'll have that in return for your staring." "Jon," he replied, "of House Mazin." A frown creased her brow. "Can't say I've heard of House Mazin, but you're squiring for House Stark and everyone knows them. Even in Dorne we know of House Stark. Grim and stony. Or so they say, but I like the Starks I've met so far." "They're good people," he pointed out, painfully aware that her house and his own would soon be at war on opposite sides. "But I'm just a bastard. I'll never amount to much wherever I go." Elia sighed deeply. "I'll never understand Westerosi attitudes to bastards, Jon. In Dorne things are so very different. Bastards are born of passion, not sin. If the taint of bastardy and the judgment of others gets too much for you, you should present yourself to my brother, Prince Oberyn. Your birth will never go against you there. Tell him I sent you." "Thank you, your grace," he replied, meaning it. "But for now, I think I'm needed here." "You and I both, sadly," she replied. "You don't like it here?" he asked, feeling rather forward. "No, I love it. Especially on Dragonstone, when it's just me and my children," she explained. "But everyone here treats me like I'm made of glass. I know I shouldn't complain, but the way they all look at me, sometimes it gets to me. And I know what they say and what they think, that I've married too far above my station, and I'm too weak to be a queen." An all too familiar dread came over him as she talked of her life in King's Landing. He had never given it much thought before, because previously it was in the past. But here, in this time, he found himself wondering why she was not on Dragonstone when the Lannisters sacked the capital. She could have been saved there. She could have fled to Dorne, where Prince Doran, her own brother, would surely have kept her and her children safe. Instead, she was raped and put to the sword by Gregor Clegane, skewered on a blade just like her babies. Speaking to her now, knowing her fate like so many others in that hall, made his stomach fold. "Now you're looking at me that same way everyone else does," she said, disappointed. With that pity in your eyes, twice everyone gave me up for dead. Twice I survived. First with Rhaenys, second with Aegon. I think I have a fighting chance, don't you? She smiled as she reached the end of the last sentence, causing Jon to smile too. According to what he had heard about her, she had been brave at the end, protecting her infants while trying to fight off that fighting, malignant mountain. He dared think she was stronger than many gave her credit for. Maybe, he answered. I think maybe we all do. On that we agree, Jon of House Mass, she replied. They continued walking until they reached a place behind the hall, out of sight of anyone else. When suddenly, Elia's countenance changed. Now, listen to the warning I give you. My father-in-law noticed you this afternoon, and that never ends well. Have a care, because there's only so much my husband can do to protect you. Jon felt a chill seize him, tightening his belly. What do you mean, noticed me? Even though they were alone, Elia cast a furtive glance around in all directions. Then she grabbed his wrist, leading him farther from the front of the hall and into the darkness that overlooked the God's Eye. You heard him at the joust this afternoon. He said he would be watching you, he reminded him. Westeros doesn't make idle threats, Jon, so be careful. But I was only talking to your husband, he protested, as if it were her making the allegations. Elia shook her head, which is exactly why he thinks you're plotting against him. There's you and a few others he's homed in on, like some kind of hawk. There's a raft of Lannisters he thinks are out to get him. He's starting to get angry about that mystery knight, too. The one who won the joust today. The one with the laughing tree on his shield, Jon cut in, feeling his panic rise. He almost used the wrong pronoun, but righted himself in the nick of time. Elia nodded, then tightened her grip on his hands to get his attention back in focus. Listen, Westeros was not supposed to be here. It was his master of whispers, Varys, who put it into his head that the real reason for this tourney was so that all the lords could get together and plot to put my husband on the throne sooner rather than later. So now he's here, uninvited, and full to the brim with suspicion. He suspects literally every man, woman, and child attending this tourney, so be careful and mind how you go from here. And don't run either. That way he'll be convinced you have something to hide. Do you understand? Jon nodded. What if the Mystery Knights stopped riding in the tournament? Elia shook her head again. It's too late. Aerys already noticed the knight. Vanishing will only confirm his suspicions. Do you know who it is? You rode against him, and Aerys probably thinks you lost deliberately. He did lose deliberately, thinking it was Benjen under that armor. But now he had to steel himself and lie. I have no idea who it was. Elia looked relieved. Even he can't burn you for someone you don't know. Now, we must return before anyone untoward notices our absence. If anyone says anything, I'll pretend I took ill and you were just making sure I was all right. See, there's a benefit to having everyone thinking I'm a delicate petal. Despite his cold apprehension, Jon raised a smile. I thought there would be, and your grace, thank you for warning me, despite the risks to yourself. Elia had begun to walk away, but stopped and looked back. It was nothing. Before you go, he said, one more thing. How true are Varys' suspicions? She paused before giving a highly guarded answer. I'm sure everyone here really cares about old Wyn's daughter's name day. The sarcasm was obvious. In order to keep up appearances, Jon abandoned his plans to meet Bran and return to the hall where the dancing was still in full swing. From the tail of his eye, he watched as Elia returned to Prince Rhaegar for another gentle song. He noticed him whisper in his ear while looking at him. Whatever was said, she nodded and he kissed her forehead in reply. Lyanna, oblivious to what had happened between himself and Elia, was dancing with a very drunk Robert Baratheon. She was smiling, but it seemed forced now. Benjen was still at the table, sneaking alcoholic drinks, while none of his elders were watching. Eddard was still dancing, surprisingly well, with Ashara Dane. Brandon looked on, incredulous. Our Ned, he said, as Jon approached. I wouldn't have thought he had it in him. I think Ned's full of surprises, Jon thought to himself. Going by the look on his face, Ned was as surprised as everyone else also. Jon watched a while, happy that his father was happy, and Lady Ashara was good. Her steps were light and graceful. The way her hair caught the light only added to her pale beauty. Ned looked like he had died and gone to heaven, and then come back alive. Meanwhile, Jon had Princess Elia's warnings echoing in his head. Restless, he kept moving and circulating. When he stopped, midway across the floor, he turned to the dais that now seemed to loom across the whole room. King Akra sat there alone, yellow nails, raking his tatty silver beard as his beady lilac eyes made a note of everyone in the room. Never still, never even pretending to enjoy himself, Eris watched and judged and found them all wanting. "My lady." Bran woke Sansa up gently, nudging her shoulder. She had finally fallen asleep, slumped over the side of Jon's bed. The first thing she did, however, was check to see if her brother showed any signs of coming to. But he remained the same, sleeping and slack, not moving so much as a muscle now. "My lady, it seems you may have been right about your brother's direwolf." Still drugged with sleep, she had almost forgotten that Summer turned up at Castle Black the day before. But when she had the guards raise the portcullis to let him through the tunnel, the wolf turned and ran back into the northern wilderness from whence he had so unexpectedly came. She could only stand and watch, helplessly, as Summer was swallowed up by the haunted forest. When she tried to follow, the guard grabbed her arms and repeated his dire warnings about what lay beyond. She tried to explain it was her brother's wolf, but they had dismissed her. "All wolves look alike, little lady," he said, dismissively. But Sansa knew a dire wolf when she saw one, and a tame dire wolf could only mean one thing: her brother's. Now Bran was standing over her, holding a small, neat scroll. There was no sigil in the seal, but clearly had been delivered by Raven that morning. Still a little befuddled, she took the scroll and noted the wax stamp had already been broken. "Bran," she gasped, leaping to her feet. But Brienne, despite her earlier admission that she may have been wrong, was still cautious. "My lady, please. This could be fake." "But who else would send a letter from north of the wall?" she countered. "We know Bran must be there because of Summer, so there's no one else." Before Brienne could argue any further, she turned her attention back to the note. With dismay, she noticed Bran had not signed it. There was only a crudely drawn map with directions through the haunted forest, and a description of the largest heart tree in the grove she would eventually come to. But there was no question of her leaving Jon. It seemed an absolute, but when she thought that Bran might be out there, she soon wavered. She had been filling her days by making a replica of their father's cloak, and it now lay, partially done, covering Jon's body. She closed one hand over the pelts she had been using to line it. If Bran was somewhere out there, she knew she would have to go to him, if only to bring him to Castle Black where they could all be safe. Soon she found herself reasoning it out. Whatever was out beyond that wall, it wasn't Ramsay Bolton. Compared to him, nothing much scared her anymore. Brienne had a look of deep sorrow on her broad face. "My lady, I know what you're thinking. If Jon wakes up, he is surrounded by people loyal to him," she said. "The mutineers are hanged, he will be safe. But Bran is crippled and in a place they all say is dangerous. If he's out there, Brienne reiterated, if he is out there, for all we know, the wolf is just running free, and you could be being lured into a trap." Sansa felt herself deflating, along with her resolve. It had seemed impossible. When Theon told her her brothers were alive somewhere, that Bran, of all of them, would survive for as long as he had. "Fine," she replied at length. "For now, we do nothing, and wait here. But if I get assurances that Bran is out there, then surely you can understand. I must get to him." Satisfied for now, at least, Brienne nodded. Petyr Baelish has also arrived in Mole's Town. "I don't care," she cut in, turning away. "Let him stew." That afternoon, she found herself walking the yards at Castle Black. There were as many wildlings there as real brothers of the Watch. Despite all that had been said of them, she did not mind. She found Tormund Giantsbane fletching arrows beside the wall itself. He was a huge man, with a shaggy red beard, who went weak-kneed whenever Brienne was nearby. It made her laugh sometimes, even at the times when she felt she would never laugh again. On this occasion, though, she had come to him to discuss something serious. "Tormund," she said, sitting beside him on the bench. "What can I do for you, little lady?" he asked, stripping another goose feather. Sansa looked up at the wall, shielding her eyes from the sun's glare on the ice. "Tell me truthfully what's out there." Turning her gaze back to Tormund, she could tell from the look on his face that she would not like the answer. As if proving Tormund's point, a snowstorm came billowing in from the north in great white squalls. This far north, they closed in fast and sent men scattering for the safety of Castle Black's main keep. Only the watchmen on the wall itself were left to brave it out, with just a brazier to ward off the killer cold. Meanwhile, Sansa followed Tormund and only broke off to collect her unfinished cloak. It lay where she left it, covering Jon's sleeping body beside the fires in his chambers. She paused with her hands gripping the lining pelt. "Sorry," she said, removing it gently. There was a proper blanket underneath, so it wasn't like she was leaving him there naked. Still, she felt guilty. "It'll be finished when I bring it back. Then you can keep it. It's just like the one Father wore." She kissed his brow, finding it warm and clammy, before exiting the Lord Commander's chambers. Outside, she hunched downwind, sheltering beneath the half-finished cloak, as she hurried across the cobbles. On the way, she saw a cloud of osier thorn's ashes blowing across the yard and through the iron lattice of the portcullis. She did not think he would be missed. Moments later, she shouldered open the door to the common hall of Castle Black, where the men had pushed back the tables and stoked a fire in the main hearth. Accepting a horn of honey mead from Dolorous Ed, she took a seat directly in front of the fire and savored the warmth washing over her. For a long moment, everyone was silent as they got the feeling back in their hands and feet. Lady Melisandre was igniting more fires in braziers and setting up candles on the high table. Sansa watched the Red Priestess from the tail of her eye, wondering just how far her powers truly extended. Meanwhile, Serdivas and some brothers of the Night's Watch supped their mead and gazed contemplatively into the flames. Only the heavy weight of Tormund flopping down beside her distracted her. Ever vigilant of her lady's honor, Brienne joined them and sat at Sansa's other side, protective as a mastiff. "The little lady here was asking me what lies beyond the wall, boys," Tormund said aloud, glancing around the room. "Every man here has a story or two to tell about that, I think." Dolorous Ed moved to the middle of the clearing, warming his hands over the flames, his sharp features uplit by the wavering flames. Mormont's old raven was perched on his shoulder. "You don't want to know what lies beyond, milady." "But I do," she insisted, setting her drink aside. "I've heard my other brother is out there, and I need to find him." Ed looked skeptical. "Bran, isn't it?" "Wherever he is, it'll not be out there, I promise you." "It's true, he is." Another man, whose name she did not know, cut over Ed. With all eyes on him, he continued. "Samwell Tarly and his wilding girl found the young Stark with 3 traveling companions inside the night fort. The wolf was with them too. Sam led him through the gate deep inside the fort, the one that only opens to men of the Night's Watch. The Lord sworn him to secrecy, but I think Sam told the Lord Commander anyway." Sansa was surprised. "Jon knew?" The man shrugged. "Don't quote me on it, but I think so. At any rate, Sam told me." It no longer mattered whether Jon knew, she realized. Facts remained, and Bran was still out there. Hopes and speculation had been proven, and it was down to her to act. She still had the map folded in her pocket, so she handed it over to one of the rangers. "Where is this place? Can anyone get me there?" No one replied immediately, but they conferred among themselves. Passing the map along, they continued muttering, and another ranger compared it to a professionally drawn map. "That's the Weirwood Grove deep in the haunted forest, that," one finally replied. "It's leagues from here, and that's their territory now." The atmosphere grew tense, several of the men no longer meeting her gaze. Everyone seemed to know what he meant, but she was still in the dark. "Whose territory?" she asked. "The others," the same man replied. "That's who, and you won't want to be running into those boys on a dark night." She had only the vaguest notion of what the others even were. Monsters made of ice, with eyes as blue as stars. That was what old Nan used to tell them. But she had lived with monsters before. First Joffrey and his legion of sycophantic courtiers. Then Ramsay Bolton, who had made Joffrey look half a child by comparison. The others are no mortal enemy. Once more, Sansa felt like Melisandre knew more than she was letting on. She stepped round the tables and positioned herself in Sansa's direct line of sight. "Neither living nor dead, they serve the great other with armies of corpses. Ask the men here. They'll tell you." Dolorous Ed volunteered first. "Your brother and I were hardened together. We saw them with our own 2 eyes, milady. We saw the village attacked by the others. Hundreds lay dead on the shoreline. Then that thing, whatever he is, clicks his icy fingers, and up get those self-same hundreds of corpses. If Jon was conscious now, he'd sooner lock you in an ice cell than let you go wandering off out there." But Jon wasn't conscious, and all she could see was her little brother surrounded by ice monsters and the living dead. Her little brother, who couldn't even walk anymore, guarded by a simple stable hand, and 2 others who were strangers to her. While her imagination worked against her, Tormund spoke at last. When the dead come back, child, they're not the people you knew. They come back slaves to the others, doing their bidding with only cold and hate in their blackening hearts, he said, all humor gone from him. They're back only to kill and make the other's army bigger, stronger. They'll have no more pity for you than they do a dog. He paused, looking her straight in the eye, and nodded toward the place outside where the wall stood. Don't come all this way, only to die out there. Fear lay cold and heavy over her own heart now. It chilled her blood like a slow-acting poison, crawling through her veins and crippling her a piece at a time. She looked at the silent, stony faces of the Rangers and saw the truth of their words written in their darkening expressions. They had all been out there, seen what lay beyond, and come back to tell the tale. Sansa knew she had no choice. There was nowhere left to run, so it was time to stand and fight. The Mystery Knight's armor had been dumped beside the Heart Tree, even more scratched and even more dented than it was before. The breastplate now bore a large scratch and dent, where Haig's lance had glanced off it, but it had still not been enough to throw Lyanna. Jon knelt down, studying it closely. Gingerly, between thumb and forefinger, he picked up the mail shirt and noted his aunt's bloodstains clinging to some of the metal rings, dropping it again. He turned his attention to the breastplate and helm. Protecting the head and chest, they were the most important items among the lot. Before getting to work on them, however, he reached for a root of the heart tree and wrapped his hand around it. Bran, he whispered. Although there was no one else around, he still felt foolish calling to his brother through a tree. Nor did he understand it, but he had seen Bran here himself. Bran, he repeated, more firmly. Jon tensed. A soft wind plucked the ruby-red leaves of the boughs above his head. A nearby stream trickled by, and a rat scurried through the undergrowth. Bran remained conspicuous by his absence. He looked around, squinting to see through the darkness for a minute, then gave up and returned to the armor feeling more than a little foolish. Even without equipment, he thought he would be able to straighten out the breastplate in time for the morning's joust. The helm, to his relief, was undamaged. I'm here, Jon. Bran's voice sounded from behind the tree. Did you think it hadn't worked? Relief washed over him as he set aside the armor. I'll get used to it. Bran was walking again. He stepped nimbly over the gnarled tree roots to join him a few feet away, where the land had formed a convenient, natural step to sit on. So, what's been happening? Asked Bran. Then his eye fell on the armor. Is that the Knight of the Laughing Tree? Yes, he confirmed, remembering how their father had never once mentioned this to them. Did father ever tell you about it? He said. Nothing to me, and you'll never guess who it is, Bran. After a quick look at the dented armor, Bran hopped back onto the step and sat beside him. No, never. I only heard the story from Mira Reed, and I thought it passing strange that father never told us. So, who is it? Howland Reed's daughter, Jon realized. The connection was instant, but he pushed it to the back of his mind. For now, it's Lyanna, he answered. Our aunt. Bran choked on his own laughter. Really? Does father know it's her? Jon nodded. I rode against her, thinking it was Benjen, and she unhorsed me. Father came to see me in the tent afterwards, and he told me himself it was her. Why do you think he never told us? Bran shrugged. He never did talk much about Lyanna. Never in detail. It was too hard for him. Lyanna was as real to Jon now as the ground on which he walked. Sometimes he almost forgot that she was dead in their time, that they had never met her. All she had been was a name in a sad story about a helpless girl stolen away in the night to be raped and murdered at the behest of a tyrant prince. Over the last week or so, all these characters had transformed into living, breathing people, and much of the original story didn't seem to add up anymore. Father had been left with a ghost for a sister, whose memory lay on him like a shroud. The sadness in Ned Stark's gray eyes that had been Lyanna's legacy. Earlier on, he began remembering what happened after the feast. Elia Martell came to me, warning me that the Mad King has noticed me, and he has noticed the Mystery Knight. Bran frowned. Meaning what? Meaning things could go badly for us if we don't stop drawing attention to ourselves, he answered flatly. Bran, I've met the princess, and I've spoken to Rhaegar Targaryen. A couple of times now. He's not the type of person to, do what they say he did. Actually, he seems rather noble. Bran drew a deep breath, his expression softening almost sympathetically. He's not very well going to tell everyone, Jon. Besides, it hasn't happened yet. Things are about to change. Don't judge anyone. Not yet. But what if... Jon began, again, faltering swiftly. Something was off, and he couldn't quite put his finger on it. so it seemed pointless trying to tell Bran. Instead, he shrugged and added, I just think there's something amiss. Anyway, little brother, what have you been able to find out? What's going on at Castle Black? Sansa's there, he answered, perking up considerably. I've sent for her, but the brothers who remain there are all loyal to you. Too loyal to you to let your little sister go wandering beyond the wall. There's a woman knight with her, and a squire. They will follow her if she chooses to go. I skin-changed Mormont's raven to listen in on everything. Can't you send the rangers a message? He asked, frustrated at not being able to do anything directly. Tell them to go with her, if they must. We need to get Sansa to you, wherever you are. I know, Jon, but it's not that simple, replied Bran. Sansa will come, don't worry. Her third eye opened the day Lady was put to death, but she doesn't know what it is. Do you know why she's at Castle Black yet? The last he had heard, she was forcibly married to Tyrion Lannister and living in King's Landing, surrounded by enemies but with at least one protector on her side. But that was before Tyrion was accused of murder. Sansa vanished, and that was the last thing he knew for sure, like Arya. He had assumed she was dead. Someone brought her north and forced her to marry Ramsay Bolton, explained Bran, his expression darkening. Even in the dappled moonlight, Jon could see his brother's eyes watering, anger and pain both evident there. Brain? He said, gently prompting for more details. I went back through the tree just to see what happened. His voice wavered, and he looked away to hide his tears. He beat her, and he raped her every night, Jon. The word punched him in the stomach, winding him. Then, from the tips of his fingers, everything else went numb. The Boltons had taken their home, murdered their kin, and now raped their sister. How much more would they take? They had nothing left to give, but the Boltons always seemed to find a way to take anyway. Now Sansa. He could not think on it. Even in his head, his inner voice could not repeat what Bran had said to him. Bran, he said, whatever's going on here doesn't matter anymore. You have to find a way to get me home so I can take care of Sansa. Can't you see? I have to go home and the past be damned. Without even waiting for an answer, Jon got to his feet and went to the heart tree. That hateful face followed him, watching as he circled the trunk. Bran came through the tree and went through the tree. Grabbing a branch, he tried to walk through it, but only bumped hard into the smooth bark. Cursing, he tried again. There was no entry, nothing, no escape. He was a prisoner of history. Jon, you can't do it, Bran said, watching him with pain in his blue eyes. Please, sit back down. Trembling with anger and frustration, he did as Bran asked and sat. The three-eyed raven showed me something today, said Bran. It was some old tower in some mountains far from here. Father was there with Howland Reed and they fought some men. Inside, I thought I heard a woman scream. When Bran trailed off, Jon irritably snapped. And Bran looked stung but continued anyway. Well, not much. The raven wouldn't let me see anything else. So why are you telling me? Jon demanded, irritably. He needed to go home, not be regaled with Bran's time-traveling anecdotes. Because I called out to Father and he heard me. Jon, Bran protested. It means something, don't you see? There must be a reason why he heard me in that place. Jon rolled his eyes. Bran, I don't care anymore. Look, let these people go to war. Let them tear each other apart for the sake of an iron chair. These people are the reason our family is scattered. They're the reason our home is gone, and our sister is being raped by our enemies. And our brother died with Rose Bolton's knife in his heart. So to hell with them, and long may they stay there. I don't care. Just find a way to bring me home, so together we can put right the mess they made. Or find a way to bring me to the Riverlands before Robb goes to that fucking wedding. Do something useful with that three-eyed raven. Something that can make a real difference, because these people here are beyond saving. Raging at Bran made no difference, but it made him feel better. He wanted Ramsay Bolton's guts in a bucket and his head on a plate. There were lots of things he now wanted but was powerless to get while shackled to the past. There's a reason you're here that will make a difference to our time, Jon, Bran repeated. I don't know why you were brought here, but you didn't land here by chance. Nothing happens by chance. Then find out what that is so I can come home. Jon cut over him. Realizing he was only lashing out at the only one who understood him, he drew a deep breath and pulled himself together. Bran, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to rant at you. Bran raised a pained smile. It hurts me too, Jon. Just as much as it hurts you. All we can do is work out what's happening and why. but we need each other. Jon attempted to stymie the tears by burying his face in his hands and heaving a sigh. I know, but try to find Rickon and Arya too. Bring us all home, because all of us need each other now. Then go back to your tower and find out what's in there, Bran. Bran opened his mouth to reply, but it was another voice that said his name. Jon both whipped around to where Lyanna stepped out of the trees and into the clearing. Silver moonlight limned her chestnut hair and made her look as pale as death itself. She looked from Jon to Bran and back again, able to see only him. Rude, yeah, he said, getting to his feet and gesturing to the heart tree. I was just talking to the gods. Her eyes widened in surprise. Well, Bran's believed himself a god for a while now. He'll be thrilled to know he's finally got his first worshipper. Despite his still raging emotions, Jon forced himself to smile. I didn't mean your brain, of course. She was still looking around the surrounding trees, as though her brother might be hiding somewhere. Suspicion filled her eyes. Meanwhile, his brain Zera was still watching, completely unseen by their aunt. Slowly, his brain backed away, passing a hand along Jon's back, as a gesture of farewell. Even then, the younger lad lingered by his tree, watching the aunt he would never know until the last moment, a sad smile playing at his lips. Lyanna gave him a dark look, but she smiled impishly at the same time. Are you certain Bran's not here? I definitely heard you say his name, and if this is some trick the pair of you cooked up, there will be consequences. The clearing was empty now, but for the two of them, sadly, Jon shook his head. He's gone. I was just praying aloud. My lady, I'm sorry. Her intuition seemed to kick in, and she noticed something amiss with him. Her expression softened as she drew closer, looking him dead in the eye. Jon? She said, softly. What is it? You look like you've been punched in the face several times. The emotion he had been just about keeping in check began to spill over. He was viewing Lyanna through tears, standing stagnant in his eyes, blurring her at the edges. The more he tried to stop, the more determined they seemed to be to overwhelm him. He couldn't even talk without stammering and stuttering, so he held his silence and inwardly begged her to understand. Without saying anything, Lyanna wrapped her arms around him and eased him to the ground. Shush, she cooed, tightening her embrace. Shush, now. Can't you tell me what's wrong? Maybe he could tell her. He could tell her every crack in Winterfell's walls, every nook and cranny right down to the crypts. Enough to display his intimate acquaintance with the place and show he's not quite who he said he was. But now, whenever he conjured that castle in his mind, he saw the flayed man hanging off the ramparts. He saw Robb with Grey Wind's head stitched onto his lifeless body, paraded through the Riverlands. He even saw Lady Stark, her throat a red ruin. Most of all, he saw a monster raping his sister. He had no voice to speak those horrors aloud. It's nothing, he said, finally pulling himself together. I'm sorry for troubling you. Slowly, he extricated himself from her embrace. She looked at him intently as though trying to read his mind. Are you still worried about Princess Aisling Warning? If you are, don't dwell on it. I hear Daenerys suspects everyone anyway, regardless of what they do, and he can't burn us all. Seizing on a convenient excuse, Jon nodded. Yes, that's all it is. All this, it just got too much. Lyanna did not look convinced. Well, if we all stick together, everything will work out for the best. Don't you think? Jon wished it were that simple. Still, he nodded his head. Meanwhile, Lyanna smiled as she picked up her shield and studied the picture of the laughing weirwood tree. While I'm here, I think I'll cheer him up too, she said, nodding to the real heart tree. Despite himself, he laughed as Lyanna placed her shield directly over the tree's hateful and twisted face. She took care to align it just so the laughing face covered the place where the downturned scowl of the real thing would be. That's better, he concurred. Hours later, under the warm sun of the false spring, Jon was back in the spectator's stands, watching history unfold. Just like the day before, the royals were directly behind him, but Elia showed no sign of recognizing him. Only Rhaegar gave his shoulder a firm squeeze as he shuffled along the packed stands to sit beside his wife. Jon turned to look up at him, getting a smile in return. Next to Rhaegar, Eärts was silent and mutinous alongside his terrified-looking queen. Pale and tremulous, Rhaella kept her wide-eyed gaze fixed on the lists. Wary of staring too long, Jon also returned his attention to the lists. Lyanna, back in her disguise, was lining up to take on a squire from House Blanc. Oh, look, Aerys drawled behind him. It's the cunt Of the laughing tree, our old friend? Let's see him getting knocked into oblivion by whatever shit this is from House Blount. But Eris was wrong. Lyanna knocked her opponent clean out of the saddle and claimed his horse and armor as ransom. A rapturous applause burst from the stands, and she even gave a bow from horseback. Jon couldn't help but smile to himself as he exchanged a knowing look with Eddard, who sat beside him. He could barely bring himself to imagine what Eris was doing now. "Who's next?" Jon asked, leaning closer to his future father. "House Frey," Ned called back. "Gods, I hope she gets this one too." House Frey were notorious throughout the Riverlands, it seemed, and for all the wrong reasons. A chorus of boos and hisses went up as soon as the Frey's squire entered the list, which only made them cheer the louder when Lyanna re-entered. Jon watched, tense, and with his hands curled into fists. This was the last of the squires that had beaten Howland Reed so badly, giving the Starks even more reason to will Lyanna's success. The checkered flag dropped, the crowd roared, and the knights charged toward each other. Their destroyers kicked up clouds of loose sand, and the lances smashed into splinters on impact. And Jon watched as Frey was thrown from the saddle, landing in a tangled heap of armor and sand. His horse charging on without out. Lyanna had done it. She had beaten them all, and Jon was on his feet, with everyone else, cheering and applauding. If Lyanna wanted to soak up the applause she was getting, she did not show it. She promptly reined in her mount and left the yard. Returning later with the armor and other horses of the knights she unhorsed, she kept her helm in place as she claimed her reward. A fortune in gold by Jon's reckoning. "I demand no ransom, sir," he heard her say, but it was strange. Lyanna made her voice boom through the sonorous helm she wore, as well as her efforts to sound like a man. "I demand no reward, but for the lords of houses Frey. Hay and Blent to chastise their rude and unchivalrous knights for their behavior toward those who cannot defend themselves." Jon noted the direct reference to the beating of Howland Reed and heartily approved. Grinning, he found the spot where the defeated squires sat, humiliated and defeated. Their lords now eyeing them all with fury. Meanwhile, the mystery knights fighting the good fight only won Lyanna even more acclaim from the crowds. Evidently, Lyanna had said her piece and was now leaving the yard. Only when she was out of sight did he notice the king had gotten to his feet. Suddenly the crowds fell silent, and the tension in the tilt yard rose. Remembering Elia's warning from the night before, Jon slowly turned in his seat to get the lunatic king in his line of sight. Elia's face had turned red with fury. His small lilac eyes were narrowed, and he jabbed one yellow curling fingernail out over the yard.
"What? Who was that man?"
"That mystery knight?" he demanded, voice ringing out clear. "That man is my enemy, the enemy of my people. Father, please be reasonable." Jon heard Riker's whispered plea, but it did no good. Eris was incandescent with fury. "I said, bring him to me. He will stand trial for his crimes against my lords, and he will be adjudged guilty. Bring him. I said, bring him before me. Now." Jon had turned back to face the front as the king raged on, but it seemed as if the crowds of spectators had been stunned into silence. No one moved, no one dared say a thing. Even Raetier was silent now, gripping his wife's hand. Then Jon whipped back around as a sudden commotion broke out. Eris had smacked his son around the head, then pulled him back up by the hair. "I said, bring that traitor knight to me now. Are you deaf as well as stupid?" he roared down his son's ear. Rogier recovered himself with grace and dignity. He stood up straight, betraying no sign of anger or pain. "As you wish, your grace." Although he couldn't see the prince, Jon heard him making his way back down the stands to carry out his father's commands. That alone seemed to break the spell of fear. Eris had brought down on them, and others soon followed. Even Robert Baratheon could be seen inching out with his friend Richard of Lonmouth, hot on his heels. But Ned remained, rigid and silent, staring fixedly ahead. His jaw was tight with apprehension. "We've got to find her and fast," he hissed in Jon's ear. "Come on." Everything changed on the turn of a hair. Crowds that had before seemed friendly and jubilant now seemed hostile and suspicious. Laughter echoed empty through the stalls surrounding the keep as Jon pushed his way through, heading towards the flowstone yard. He tried to tell himself he was imagining things, but the eyes of the people who met his own, as he shouldered his way through, suddenly looked like they knew too much. He tried to compose himself, to tell himself they couldn't possibly know. If he paused to look, he occasionally caught sight of a white-cloaked Kingsguard, vanished around a bend or being swallowed by the crowds as they searched for the mystery knight. Then the crowds pressed in on him, making him feel boxed in and breathless. Eventually his fears got the better of him, and he grabbed onto the back of Ned's tunic to stop him. "My lord, we mustn't go straight to her." "What?" Eddard looked back in, impatient and eager to get moving again. Jon shook his head, glancing furtively around the crowds swarming through the market stalls. They were all minding their own business and enjoying the festivities, but in his head they were watching, observing, and secretly taking notes. "We can't look like we know where we're going," he explained, lowering his voice to a whisper. "If we're being watched, we've got to make it look as if we're searching. If we go straight there, they'll know." Eddard's expression briefly clouded with concern as he realized what Jon was getting at. "Gods, you're right. Look, let's split up now and we'll meet at the godswood. Try the flowstone yard and the forge, and I'll try the ballrooms and kitchens. But don't take too long, she must scared out of her mind." Jon nodded his agreement and immediately split from Ned. He tried to make his wanderings more aimless, as if he didn't really know where he was going and was just being swept along with the crowds. But he could hear the frantic beating of his heart over the chatter of the crowds and knew it would not be stilled until he reached his aunt. Eddard thought she may have been scared out of her mind. Jon wasn't even sure whether she knew. For all they know, she could reveal her true identity expecting a hero's welcome, only to be marched off to the dungeons and a fiery death soon after. As he crossed the flowstone yard, he remembered the laughing tree on her shield. In an instant of sickening dread, he realized every man and his dog would probably now be descending on the godswood in search of that mystery knight. He changed direction abruptly, abandoning all pretenses at a search, and took off at a run, weaving his way through the crowds and dodging the practicing sparrows. Only the sight of Rhaegar Targaryen issuing commands to men-at-arms stopped him this time. "Sarger Barristan, I want you to stay with me," he commanded. "Sarger Arthur, you're to search the Wailing Tower and cellars beneath. Sargerwald is to cover the Tower of Dread and its halls. Everyone else is to scour the outlying villages in case the night went that way." Then his eye caught Jon's. "You're to search the godswood." They were some distance away, but Rhaegar seemed to be addressing him personally. "Me?" he called back breathlessly. The only reason he didn't panic was because he was headed for the godswood anyway. "Yes, you," the prince called back. Already the others were dispersing, but for Sir Barristan Salmi and the prince himself. The prince, who now approached him with a purposeful stride. "I'm coming with you," he added, leading him toward the godswood. "Sir Barristan, stay at the entrance and make sure no one else follows us in." "As you wish, your grace," Sir Barristan agreed with a nod of the head. Powerless to protest, Jon followed the prince into the godswood, jogging to keep up with him. At first, nothing more was said. Then they turned a corner along the beaten earth track, and Rhaegar threw out one hand to bar his way forward. Jon halted, his mouth dry with fear, as he remembered the first time he spoke with the prince after the knights tried to pick a fight with him. He had seen the armor in the cart. He had held the gauntlets, but Jon could not recall whether he saw the shield or not. Seconds later, his worst fears were confirmed. "I saw you bringing that armor to your lord," said Rhaegar, turning to face him. Jon was quick to protest. "It wasn't for my lord. I thought it was, but it turned out my lord wanted it for someone else. That's the truth of it. I swear to you. My lord is Benjen Stark, and you saw him in the stands when the knight was in the lists. He couldn't be in two places at once." Suspicion etched itself in the prince's features. "You're Brandon's squire." "No. Benjen is half your age, but look, that's not the point. If you know who it is, you must tell me now." "I can't," Jon cut in. "I don't know, your grace." Rosier backed down and stepped away, drawing a deep breath as he did so. Once composed again, he spoke in a low voice. "I have sent my men on a deliberate wild goose chase to throw them off the scent. I have Sir Barristan Salmi preventing anyone else from getting in here and finding our mutual friend. Do you think I would have done that if I intended on letting my father burn this man?" Despite the prince's outward signs of sincerity, Jon still faltered. His own recent experiences taught him that no one was to be trusted, less still people one barely knew. But the prince spoke sense, and, if Elia was anything to go by, they were not the types to blindly follow in Yaris's rages. But he could not take the risk, not with Lyanna's life at stake. Torn over what to do next, Jon turned a circle and ran his hands through his hair. The weight of the ramifications was too great. Then the decision was made for him. Jon, it's all right. I'm here. Lyanna's voice was calm as she stepped into the pathway, but Jon could see a flicker of fear in her dark gray eyes. After dipping a curtsy to the prince, she rose and added, "Take me to his grace, and I can explain what happened to my father's innocent bannerman. You see, your grace," Howland Reed was set upon by those squires and beaten badly. "I did what I did to defend the honor of my house, not to bring dishonor to House Targaryen, nor any other." "It was you?" Rogier gasped, looking her up and down. Lyanna was dressed like a lady again, all in blue and silver silks with the daisy chain in her hair, but all the laughter had gone from her eyes as she stood her ground defiantly. "Ah, your grace, it was me," she replied. "And I'd do it again to defend the weak and uphold the honor of houses Stark and Reed. Just escort me to your father, and I will explain what happened and why. He is a gracious lord, I hear, and I'm sure he will understand." In his heart, he knew she was clutching at straws. Still, Jon looked to Rhaegar, who knew the king better than anyone, to gauge his reaction. But worry and apprehension filled those indigo eyes now, and his gaze darted furtively around the trees, as though worried there were eavesdroppers. His body tensed beneath that scarlet cloak, and he whipped around as quick as an adder. "Who's there?" he demanded. "Show yourself." Lyanna moved quickly to pacify him. "Your grace, it is only my little brother, Benjen." Rosier's relaxed again, but the tension didn't quite leave him altogether. Not even when Ben, as slight and small as he was, followed his sister into the clearing. It was obvious, just from looking at the boy, that he did not share his sister's confidence when it came to dealing with the Mad King. "Lya," he said, voice trembling. "He's going to burn us both for this." "We can't talk here," Rosier said, looking all around him. Jon quickly seized an opportunity. "The heart tree," he said. "Follow me, I'll take us there." Without waiting for an answer, he led the way along the tracks. Although Lyanna and Benjen already knew the way, they kept a small distance behind him as he all but ran to the twisted heart tree. Once there, sat at its base near the roots and wrapped his hand around one of them, as if steadying himself. Once the others joined him, he looked to Lyanna. "Breen," he called out, as if suddenly remembering him, gripping the root and then letting go. "I just remembered Lord Brandon is looking for the Mystery Knight. Should we send for him?" Lyanna shook her head. "Certainly not." "I agree," Rhaegar concurred. "The fewer who know about this, the better, and safer for all of us." But it was his Bran who stepped out from behind the tree. He went to greet Jon, but quickly fell silent and retreated. When he saw who else was there, even though he could not be seen, he kept his distance and watched proceedings from the safety of his tree. Meanwhile, Rhaegar sat beside Jon beneath the ruby boughs of the trees and made room for Lyanna to do the same, while Benjen hovered near the pool of water nervously. After clearing his throat and composing himself, Ben explained what happened, from finding Howland Reed to Lyanna asking him to procure armor to ride in the lists and Jon making the mistake of thinking it was for him. Rhaegar listened patiently, evidently trying to come up with some way around the mess they were in. Every so often, Jon glanced over his shoulder to where his Bran was listening in. "Lady Stark," he said gravely, "my father has already sentenced you to die, and that's the inescapable truth of it. If he finds out about your brother, then he too will die." Lyanna shook her head, the delicate hold on her composure beginning to slip. "But if I could just talk to the king, explain—" "He is beyond that and has everyone searching for you," Rhaegar insisted. "You cannot reason with madness. Please listen to what I am saying. He is going to burn you." Reality soon came creeping up on Lyanna, suddenly restless and fearful. She got to her feet and paced back and forth in front of them, arms wrapped protectively around her middle. "Can you speak to him for me?" she asked, giving Rhaegar a pitiful look. "I have no right to ask, but please, if not for my sake, then my brother's." He did not know what he was getting. "Lady Stark," Rhaegar cut in, getting up to join her. "If I was just going to let my father burn you, we wouldn't be here now. I'd have just taken you straight to him. Now, we need to make a plan." But Lyanna was no longer listening. She shied from the prince like a doe slipping the grasp of a hunter, shivering and babbling as her nerves fully kicked in. I'll run right away and bring Benjen with me. The king won't be able to get me in the north. My father will protect us because the north is loyal, much more loyal than the south. Aerys won't find us anyway. We'll run north of the wall to safety. Unable to watch her floundering alone, Jon got up and closed the gap between them. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders to steady her as her knees seemed to buckle. When she looked up at him, he saw clearly the desperation in her eyes. "No one will burn," Jon insisted, firmly. "Listen to the prince and we'll find a way." Jon did not let go of her as Rogar approached again. "Whatever you do, do not run," the prince stated, firmly. "If you vanish, then father will know for sure you either know the night or that it was actually you. He'll command the King's Guard to drag you back here and burn you both in front of everyone. He likes setting such examples." "Then what can we do?" Jon demanded. "So far, all you've succeeded in doing is scaring her even more." Rosier looked stung, then apologetic even. He drew a deep breath to steady himself and gathered his wits. "Take the lady back to the stands and watch the rest of the jousts," he said calmly. "Act as if everything is normal. I will enter the lists myself, and that will take attention away from the mystery night. There will be big money on a prince riding, you see, so no one will want to miss the outcome." It didn't seem to be enough for Loni, who looked up at Ronier in disbelief. "Then what? Do we just hope that Aonis forgets his new mortal enemy, and we live happily ever after?" "I'm no fool, Lady Stark," he replied. "But please, leave it to me and I will protect you. I beg of you to trust me. Once this over, I will make sure you get to a place of sanctuary, until this is dealt with." "What about the rest of us?" Jon asked, worriedly. It had occurred to him already that he was now involved in burning to death. So soon after being stabbed to death would be a terrible fate. Before Rogar could answer, Ben stepped forward. He was still shaking, but his voice was resolute as he spoke. "I always wanted to join the Night's Watch anyway," he said, with a shrug. "As soon as I sign up, no king will be able to get their hands on me." Jon tried to argue, but Rogar nodded encouragingly. "Excellent idea, my lord. It will make that Wandering Crow's day to finally get a recruit." "Ben, no," Lyanna cried, tears welling in her eyes. "You're far too young." "But it's for the best," the boy insisted. "They'll never get me, and I'll never tell, ever." "Jon," said Rosier, "you're to escort Lady Lyanna south to Dragonstone and await me there. But not a moment before the tourney ends. Do you understand?" Jon nodded. "Yes, your grace." "Good, now we must spread out again. Give me a half hour to get out of here. Then follow me out. No one can see us all together." Before Lyanna left, she touched Raker's arm to get his attention. "Why are you doing all this just for me?" Jon studied the prince's reaction carefully. There was a tenderness in his eyes now, a drooping of his shoulders that Jon couldn't understand. It looked as if Raker wished to say many things and more, but couldn't. "Because I care," he answered, then turned to Jon. "I sent the princess to you the other night. Do you remember what she said? Moreover, do you remember what she told you about this tourney?" Jon nodded. Rosier smiled. "Good. Soon things will be very different. Once they are different, we will all be a lot safer." Bran was still watching proceedings from behind the tree, where Jon caught his eye. He knew what he was doing now. His purpose revealed itself, descending from the heavens in a fanfare of trumpets, at least in his head. This was no abduction, and war was coming anyway. War was inevitable, and the prince had already made up his mind. It was the outcome of the war in his time that was all wrong. "Sansa, wake up!" The raven spoke with Bran's voice, beating its wings against her face. Gasping in shock, she opened her eyes and found herself in front of a burning palace. A pregnant woman was being carried from the ruins by a very tall man, screaming over the sound of falling timbers. Sansa flapped her arms, trying to cry out until a man carrying a large scaled egg caught her eye. The scales glittered, drinking in the heat of the blazing inferno. The tall man gasped his last breath as the woman's babe was heaved into the world. When she turned around again, she saw Jon and Bran speaking beneath the boughs of a weirwood tree that had an evil, twisted face. "Look north," said Bran's disembodied voice. She did, and she could see the riverlands stretching all around her. Two armies clashed in a furious river of steel, an antlered stag caving in the chest of a black enameled dragon. She wept as Rhaegar Targaryen hit the water, rubies flying from his battered chest. "Lyanna," he whispered as he died. "Look north." Bran's voice grew urgent. "I'm trying," she wanted to call out, but suddenly it was too cold to speak. "Look north and fly," Bran cried out. "I can't fly," she thought to herself. Even as she did so, the north wind took her, and the little bird spread her wings and soared up and up until she was surrounded by snow and ice. Winterfell's smoldering keep briefly warmed the atmosphere, but she did not stop to look. She kept going. Past the last hearth and beyond the wall, the trees of the haunted forest spread out below her, and she could see an old footpath twisting along the rugged terrain. She followed, until she reached the clearing in the middle of the trees, where the largest weirwood she had ever seen loomed over the pines in sentinels. That's where she needed to be, she realized with a start. Waking with a gasp, she was no longer flying, but back in the Lord Commander's chambers, where Jon snored softly in a real sleep. Melisandre's fires still burned, night and day, giving so much heat it always lulled her to sleep. Of an evening, Brienne and Pod were sleeping in a small antechamber, and she did not want to wake them. Her decision could wait until morning, at least. Nonetheless, the decision had been made. Soon, they would set out to find Bran, regardless of what lay in wait. Lyanna was listless, mindlessly curling a lock of hair around her finger and gazing into the middle distance. Jon had tried to cheer her and open the window shutters to let in the light of the full moon so they could see out over the gardens. She loved the flowers, but now it seemed even they had lost their appeal. She just sat in the embrasure, with her elbow braced on the ledge and her head in her head, gazing forlornly out the mullion. "How long do you think it takes?" she asked flatly. Jon shrugged. "What?" "To burn," she replied. "I've heard Daenerys uses wildfire, which is different to ordinary fire. It's quicker and I won't feel it. It will be quick, won't it?" "That's not going to happen, so you won't feel anything at all," he assured her. "You heard what the prince said. Someone once told me the smoke overpowers people before the flames do," she added, quickly meeting his gaze. "So maybe I'll be unconscious before the flames reach me." "Leah, please," Jon implored her. "Stop thinking like that. No one will burn. All we need to do is make sure your brothers know you haven't been abducted, and it's just that you need to go away for a while, until the prince has done what he needs to do." Her mood seemed to swing from optimistic to dead already, but she had put on a brave show as she had re-entered the lists to cheer as her brother Brandon was defeated by Rhaegar. To help keep up appearances, Jon himself had entered an archery competition and made it through to the finals. If he won, he'd get a fat bag of gold, and it seemed he would be needing it. She sighed heavily. "I'm sorry, Jon. I'm doing my best, but it creeps up on me. Robert and Richard of Lonmouth found my shield propped up in the tree. Every time someone finds something, I feel like they're one step closer to realizing it was me." She paused and frowned, then, "Why do you think my brothers will assume I've been abducted?" Jon shrugged. "You know, with you going off with Rhaegar, they might get the wrong impression." She raised the ghost of a smile and laughed. "Both Ned and Ben know what's happening." "Really, Jon, you sometimes get the funniest notions in your head." He felt the color rising in his face. "I just worry, that's all. I mean, wars have been stared over, less than a nobleman's daughter being kidnapped." "I should imagine they have," she replied. "Anyway, tell me what Elia told you about the tourney." "You told me about the warning, but not that." "Lurzia told me that this tourney was called so the High Lords would all have a pretext to get together and plan a rebellion against Afris," he recalled. "He wasn't meant to be here, but Varys got wind of the plan and told him Afris decided to come at the last minute." "Oh my," she gasped. "No wonder Ace is so bloody suspicious of everyone here. Is it true? I wonder, is the rebellion going to happen anyway?" "It sounds like it," he replied. "It might even be for the best if it did." They lapsed into silence then, while Jon contemplated all he had found out. She had no choice but to go with Rhaegar, or stay and be burned as a traitor to the crown. Meanwhile, she reached into the pocket of her cloak and handed him a ring. "A gift from the prince," she said, managing a small smile. "Isn't it beautiful? I tried to give it back, it's too much. But Rosier said it was a token of his loyalty to me." Jon bounced the ring in his palm. A large ruby set in a band of silver. The stone caught the light and winked suggestively at him. It was quite some token. "You love him, don't you?" he said, handing it back. He remembered Brandon and Benjen teasing her about it, thinking they were just trying to get a rise out of her, but he could see it now as plain as day. Taking the ring back, Lyanna flushed in the face and looked away. "I feel like I can tell you these things because you're not my family. I feel like you have no interest in revealing my secrets." "Never," he promised her. "I swear." Still with her gaze averted, she made a confession. "I've been meeting him in secret in the early hours when no one else is around. The other morning when I thought I heard you talking to Bran in the Godswood, I was on my way back from meeting him then." Her breath hitched in her throat as she stifled a sob. I love him, and I think he loves me too. The abduction, the rape. Jon couldn't make sense of any of it anymore. Maybe things were different in this time, but his own was certainly very strange. He found himself wondering whether this was history repeating, or whether this is some other parallel dimension where everything was turned upside down. It felt like madness, but he kept that thought to himself. But Elia, he said softly, she's a good woman and does not deserve this. Lyanna cringed, like a child caught with her hands in the sugar bowl. You don't understand, she protested. There's things I can't tell you, but none of this is as it seems. There's things you don't understand about me too, he retorted. I don't belong here. I have a family who need me elsewhere. But I find myself following you and yours, and I'm only being told half the story. She looked stung then. Are you leaving us? When? Roshir thinks you're coming south with me. Jon shook his head. I can't get to my family, so I'll stay for as long as I can. Why, where are your family? She asked, frowning now. We can help you find them, and I will be safe enough on my own. Jon doubted that. I can't reach my family here. There's something I must do first, but I don't know what. Maybe it's helping you, then I can go home. I just need the truth. He could feel the facade of his assumed identity crumbling. This is his family, he reminded himself. Just not the family he knew. Everything looked the same, smelled the same, but was completely different at the same time. For all he really knew, this was just an elaborate dream. If you stay, you will have a place in my retinue, she promised him. If ever you want to talk, you can. Just be assured of that. He realized then that she suspected there was something amiss with him, as he did her and Reka. She was inviting him to confess. He could feel it. For now, however, he nodded and thanked her, then left without looking back. It was passing strange. Davos knew the last place he had seen Longclaw. It was the same night Melisandre had tried to resurrect the Lord Commander. Believing she had failed, he pressed the sword back into Jon's cold, dead hands, a mark of respect for a fallen warrior. He had even thought to take it to the forge for a replica to be made for Jon's funeral pyre. No sooner had that thought crossed his mind, the Lord Commander had begun to gasp for air. It happened so fast, and so sudden, so unexpectedly, it pushed the sword right out of his head. Now, days later, he couldn't for the life of him remember what had happened to it. He retraced his steps from that night. Once breathing again, Jon had been taken from his own office to old Master Aemon's chambers. Then he had been moved again to the Lord Commander's old chambers, where he was when Lady Sansa arrived. Not once could Davos say, with any certainty, that he had seen the sword. He searched under the trestle table, where Jon had been brought back, in case it was knocked off his body. Then he searched the yards and quarters in case someone had stolen it. It was nowhere to be seen, and he still found himself eyeing every man there in suspicion. He didn't like to think it had been stolen. He wanted to believe the best of them, but there was no other explanation. Sir Nebos, Melisandre stepped through the door of the Lord Commander's chambers, just as he was searching under the bed. It was the same bed Jon lay in still, motionless, but still breathing. He crawled out from beneath it, almost bumping his head on the frame as he did so. My lady, he greeted her, once upright again. I've searched everywhere. There's no sign of it. Forget about the sword, she answered. We're leaving now. He looked through the open door to where the dawn broke over the yards outside. Time had run out. Very well, he ceded, drawing a deep breath. I would rather Tormund carried proper castle-forged steel. Tormund has survived his whole life north of the wall, she gently cut over him, reassuringly rather than rude. He knows that place like he knows his own sons. I know, my lady, he agreed, but still... His words trailed off, admitting defeat, but not quite letting go of his own safety blanket of cold steel. Valyrian steel was even better. Lady Brienne carries Valyrian steel, she also reminded him. Forged from the sword of Sansa's own father, no less. None can protect her better. Davos had his own misgivings about the melting down and reforging of the Stark's ancestral sword, but that was not the time to indulge them. All he could do was give a resigned shrug and glance down at Jon's body. Willing him to awaken failed to work. The Lord Commander slept on. It had occurred to Sir Davos that if he did awaken while they were away, taking his sword with them, he may not have been best pleased. But a girl north of the wall needed a Valyrian steel sword more than a comatose man safe in Castle Black. Are the horses ready? He asked, turning to Melisandre. She nodded. Yes. If anything happens, any changes at all, send for me immediately. I will, he assured her. You have my word. He had wanted to go with them, but someone needed to stay behind and guard the Lord Commander. Tormund knew the North better than any of them, so he was out of the question. The other Night's Watchman could be called away at any moment, so that left Davos himself, seeing as Melisandre felt certain she needed to go. There had never been any love lost between him and the Red Woman. All the same, there was a kindling of respect in him, now as he followed her out into the yard. Mounted on a Garen in position between Brienne of Tarth and Tormund Giantsbane, Sansa Stark looked half a child. But she showed no fear as the portcullis guarding the tunnel's entrance groaned on its hinges. Coming up behind them, Pod the Witless Squire and a brother of the Night's Watch paired up. Finally, Melisandre joined them on a chestnut palfrey. Before leaving, their gazes met one more time. Make sure they look after her, he said, nodding to Sansa. Then you make sure you look after him, she replied, nodding toward the Lord Commander's chambers. There's more at work here than we yet understand. That was something they both agreed upon. Nodding his assent, he stood back and watched as they set off through the tunnel and into the wind-blown wilderness beyond. Soxley or Richard gave a sad shake of the head as he recounted his efforts to track down the Knight of the Laughing Tree. We searched everywhere, Your Grace. Lord Robert Baratheon and myself, that is. Lord Robert has long been a friend of mine, and I know him to be a good and honest man, a king's man through and through. He would not cover for such a scoundrel as this wayward knight, Your Grace. I have no doubt, Rucker agreed. He could see Robert Baratheon from the corner of his eye, red-faced, clutching the Laughing Tree shield in his hands, knuckles white where he gripped the edges. Baratheon looked back at him, momentarily meeting his gaze before looking away again. The prince couldn't help but wonder what he would do if he ever found out the truth of who the Mystery Knight was. After a moment pondering the matter, it occurred to him he might just be saving Lady Lyanna from her own betrothed as much as his father. Speaking of whom, Axley sat at the far end of the presence chamber, up on the dais beneath a cloth of state emblazoned with their house sigil. The scarlet dragon's head shimmered on a draught, as his father extended one long, uncut, and yellowing fingernail towards him, beckoning him over. An all-too-familiar dread stirred in the pit of his stomach, and he had stopped himself from rolling his eyes. The king beckons me, Sir Richard. Do excuse me. With that, he patted Sir Richard's shoulder before making his way to the dais. There weren't many people there that day, just the Lord of Storm's End, a few Kingsguard, and his father. Everyone else was still out searching for the Mystery Knight. Before approaching his father, he bowed as a perfunctory mark of deference, a gesture the king impatiently waved away. "Oh, do stop pretending you respect me. We both know it's a lie," Aerys griped. For what it's worth, the feeling's mutual. Rosier had long since given up contradicting him. "I love you too, father. What do you want?" The lines in his father's face hardened, their eyes meeting as his father raked his nails through his matted, yellow-stained beard. The sound of those claws snagging on the tangled hairs made Richard's stomach churn. Once he thought he saw fleas moving about in there, and the memory of it still made his skin crawl. "Who's that little whore I see you talking to all the time?" asked the Rex, still scratching at the beard. Rosier tried to smile, taking comfort in the fact that he was wise to this old man's taunts. He replied as if addressing a simpleton, loudly and slowly. "That would be my wife, father. You remember Princess Elia, don't you?" Anger flashed in his father's eyes as he became the butt of the joke, redness discoloring his pale skin. But at least he stopped scratching at the beard. "You take me for a fool. I know your game. You're just waiting for me to die." "Me, and everyone else," he thought. "We've been through this 100 times. Alzirus continued as if there had been no interruption. "You're waiting to sink your scrawny arse into that iron throne, and all those lackwits out there would love nothing more than to put you there. Don't think I don't know Viers tells me everything. Viers has his birds everywhere, and that includes in your head. It's as well there's someone tracking what goes in my head, father," Rosier answered, "because it's been quite some time since anyone knew what was going on inside yours." Had he still been a boy, Wrecker would have paid dearly for that. Wrecker liked being a man grown. All his father could do was glare at him, thinking over all the ways they could rid each other of each other. "Answer my question," Aerys said, his tone suggesting he would make a scene if he did not get a satisfactory answer. "Who is that woman you're always talking to?" Rosier drew a deep breath to steady himself. Do you mean Lyanna Stark? There, his father proclaimed. Wasn't so hard now, was it? Rosier Stark. Well, any more of that insolence from you, then don't think I won't be sending little birds fluttering into her camp too. Insofar as threats went, it was thinly veiled. I'm sure the lady has nothing to hide. Now you bore me, Aerys sighed, waving him aside. Let us hear from these lords. Some bare news of the traitor in our midst. Verbal sparring over, Rhaegar positioned himself behind his father's seat as the first men were beckoned forwards. First, through the double doors, was a shaking farmer from an outlying town who had been accused of harboring the mystery knight before the joust. He knelt on the floor, trembling and choking on his own words. As he tried to explain, he'd offered shelter to many travelers making their way to the tourney. His failure to remember them all just cost him his life. Keep him in the dungeons, Aerys instructed loftily. The sentence of burning will be carried out first thing. The queen and I will be attending. The shock of the sentence struck the man dumb for a moment. His eyes widened in mute appeal as he looked from the king to Rhaegar himself. The prince felt the breath catch in his throat, his mind reeling as he tried to think up some likely intervention. But there was no reasoning with the man when his blood was up. Robert Baratheon looked sickened as he and Richard Lonmouth stepped forward bearing the shield. As they approached, the unfortunate farmer was dragged away again, his cries of protest fading rapidly. Meanwhile, he found himself studying Robert again as their gaze met. There was a note of accusation in the younger lord's eyes, as if there was something he could have done to prevent what just happened. But for all his accusations now, he knew the lord would not have the guts to stand up to his father now. We did not find the knight, your grace, Lonmouth explained. All we found was his shield, abandoned in the godswood. Just as he suspected, Baratheon was quick to placate Aerys. But we will not stop searching until the traitor is found, your grace, he said, eyes directed to the floor on which he knelt. We will not stop until all the king's enemies are dead. As soon as the whole sorry business was concluded, Ringture slipped the noose of his father's making and headed outdoors. The sun was setting and he had meant to be practicing for the jousts on the morrow. It was his turn in the lists, something he hoped would distract his father from hunting the mystery knight. By the time he reached the godswood, it was almost dark. It was worse inside, with just the light of the full moon slanting through the canopy formed by the trees fattened on the unexpected spring weather. It wasn't so long ago they were still in the throes of winter, and not even the maesters of Old Town had seen the sudden death of the season coming. Before too long, he found her waiting by the weirwood tree, a vision in blue and silver silks. A blue winter rose was perched behind her ear, nestled among her chestnut hair as it slid over her left shoulder. There was fear in her eyes as she greeted him now. What news? She asked. By way of greeting, your future husband discovered your shield in the tree, he said, instinctively turning to the weirwood with the twisted face. He has no idea that it's you, so don't worry. But there's something far more worrying. Lyanna flinched. What? He led her over to the tree where they sat beneath its ruby boughs. The leaves looked black in the poor light, ominous and brooding. Father has noticed us together, he explained. He's talking about planting little birds in your household. Lyanna missed the enormity of what he was trying to explain, which must mean there aren't any there yet, which means they won't possibly know about my being the mystery knight. They're too late to find out. But are they? He asked, tilting his head to one side. Losier, who is that man in your retinue? Tell me again where you found him and what the circumstances were. Her expression closed as she realized who he was talking about. Jon has helped me, your grace. He hasn't once betrayed me, nor given any reason to doubt him. Then why is he lying? Rekka cut over her. Actually, there's no house Myzen. They don't exist. Not in the Vale, not in the north, nor in any other region. And he carries a Valyrian steel sword. And those don't just fall out of the sky. Lyanna averted her eyes, frowning as she tried to marshal her thoughts. We found him, almost naked, in the mountains of the moon. I saw myself, and I saw his injuries myself. They were not faked or put on in any way. In fact, he really ought to have been dead. Curious now, Rosier asked. What makes you say that? She looked at him, silently pleading to be taken seriously, because there was a knife wound straight through his heart. I saw it. We all saw it, and the maester confirmed it. Jon ought to be dead. And that was not the only wound. There were others, cutting right through his vital parts. This was new information that made his double take all over again. It crossed his mind that Jon might have been a spy sent to the Vale, who accidentally fell in with the Starks. He tried to befriend the younger man, first to get closer to Lyanna, then to try and figure out who he really was. He didn't seem like the type Varys was known to use, either. Jon's an adult for one thing, but ever since Rhaegar discovered his lies, his hackles had been raised when it came to Jon the bastard of House Mazin. I want to like and trust the lad. I really do, he confessed. He seems a noble sort, but if you had grown up at court, as I did, you would learn never to trust anyone on appearances or first impressions. I just find it highly coincidental that it was you he found on that mountainside. Lyanna shrank back, as though attempting to retreat from the conversation. I understand, and there's something else about those wounds. They weren't exactly fresh. They'd tried to heal, but they had not been treated by any proper maester. If he was attacked on that mountainside, then he had been left there for some time, a day or two, at least. Exposure, as well as blood loss, should have been the death of him. This gets stranger and stranger, he replied, becoming increasingly baffled. Well, keep him close, if you must, but just be careful. Remember that you know nothing about him or who he really is. I'm not a lackwit, your grace, she protested. Then she softened again, as she continued in a tone that was almost confessional. I can't explain it. I feel like I need to look at him even though he's older than me and a fierce fighter. At first I thought it was because he looks so much like my brother, and he speaks with a northern accent. It seemed he was one of us. But I dreamed of him not long after we met. I dreamed I needed to protect him, and I was willing to give my life for his. In the dream, I did not think twice about laying down my life to make sure he lived. It's so strange, your grace, but I've never felt like that before for anyone. Rhaegar felt his heart sink. Are you in love with him? No, she was quick to retort. No, not at all. Not like that. It was something else that compelled me. Something stronger. Stronger than mere love alone. The fact that he was so quick to jealousy and then relieved at her answer shamed him. He was grateful to the darkness for covering his blushes. I'm sure it was just a dream, my lady. Well, I'm riding in the lists tomorrow. Will you be there? To his relief, she nodded. Giants in the archery contest, but we'll both be there to see your rounds. Satisfied, he got up to leave. They always left separately. But before he let the woods swallow him, he turned back for one final word. That flower, it really suits you. The sun warmed Jon's back as he took his place in the archery range. Not as popular as jousting or the melee, the crowds assembled were sparse to his relief. Only those with an interest in the outcome, who'd been placing bets, were there, along with the wives and sweethearts of the men competing. Apart from them, there were squires compelled to be there and who looked thoroughly bored. Every time an arrow met its target, the archer's victory was greeted with a smattering of polite applause rather than rapturous ovations. Only when he scored his first victory and Lyanna had cheered loudly before falling into an embarrassed silence did anyone make a A's. From there, even she restrained herself to clapping along as the archers shifted to the next range. Someone once told him not to think too much about the shot and to let his own arrow guide him. Following that advice, he had shot his way to a near victory. Just one more range left to go, but it was the farthest away. Once more, for the final time, he drew back the bow until the twine creaked under pressure, then loosed the arrow in one fluid movement. He stood back and watched as it sailed home, hitting the butt with a dull thud right in the center. More than satisfied with his first-place victory, he collected his winnings and greeted Lyanna with a hug. Congratulations, she said, kissing his cheek. It was nothing, he replied modestly. Not exactly champion of the melee, but the gold is just as valuable. We'll be needing it when we're on our travels. Lyanna seemed surprised. Surely you want to send it back to your family. We need it more than them, he said vaguely. He couldn't quite meet her eye when he lied to her now and was quick to change the subject. So, the joust. What about them? She asked. Jon laughed. A certain prince is riding, or so I'm told. Soon, they were making their way across the flowstone yard where Jon could see Prince Rhaegar's retinue forming up. Clearly, their prince had been hard at practice all morning. As they walked, however, Lyanna had fallen silent. She looked anywhere except at him and seemed distracted by everything, even more than usual. He tried to pass it off as tiredness from another late night, but the longer it went on, it became harder to just shrug off. Is everything all right? He asked. Lyanna stopped walking and met his gaze again. Not really. Her expression was serious as she guided him the rest of the way over the yard, dodging the crowds of knights and squires, all tooling up for the events ahead. When she stopped, it was in the same alcove she used the last time something was bothering her. "You know you can be honest with me, don't you?" She was asking him, her eyes now searching his as if scanning for the truth. Like all who harbored secrets, he felt his insides squirm. He had to remind himself that he was not lying purposefully. He was lying to stop people thinking him a madman. There was no way to prove the truth, and he barely understood it himself. He had lied to the wildlings for months, he reminded himself, but this was different. He knew. "What makes you think I'm lying?" he asked, shifting uneasily from one foot to the other. She noticed his discomfiture, setting him even more on edge. "It's nothing," she assured him. But he could see as plain as day that she was just saying that. "I want you to know that, whatever you've done, you can tell me. I'll keep your secrets as you have kept mine." But her mannerisms spoke otherwise. Nor was it the first time Jon suspected her growing mistrust of him. It had been there the night before, when they spoke in private. At first he couldn't tell whether she was trying to coax his life story out of him to prove a point, or because she was trying to trip him up. Now, he realized, he had to give her something. "Look, House Mazin doesn't exist," he admitted, sighing heavily. No matter how badly he wanted to tell her the truth, he knew he couldn't, and the lies tripped off his tongue easily. "I'm running from my father. On my 18th name day, he told me I had two choices. Take the black or go hunting. If I chose to go hunting, he would see to it that I met with an accident." Guilt at using Sam's own story made him want to hate himself. But he had to do it. He felt like a worm wriggling on a hook. Meanwhile, Lyanna looked back at him, horrified. Before she could interrupt, he plowed on. "So, I chose the hunt, thinking I could shake off my father and his men. I did, for a while, and I went into the mountains, thinking they would never catch me there. But they did, they stabbed me, and left me for dead. I didn't tell you the truth about my house, because my father is still out there, looking for me, and I thought you would turn me over to him." "Never," Lyanna promised him, without a second thought. "But tell me now, is this the truth? Why would any father reject a son like you?" Jon nodded, grabbing at a kernel of truth. "This is true, I'm no one's son. I'm a bastard. My father's wife forced him to do as he did. She always hated me. Could never stand the sight of me." Lyanna's eyes widened, shining with tears as he recounted his story. At least that bit was true, even if it hadn't happened yet. "Then I'll ask no more," she said. "Come to my chambers tonight, and we can talk properly, all right? But for now, we're required elsewhere, and our troubles are behind us." Hating himself, Jon nodded and let her go ahead of him. Meanwhile, he hung back and tried to diffuse the shame he felt. After allowing himself a moment to gather his wits, he jogged to catch up with her and followed all the way to the stands. Already, just as they took their seats alongside Ben and Ned, Prince Rhaegar had scored his first victory of the day. Still, Jon couldn't shift the weight of the biggest lie of all. Silence fell over the Starks as they sat around a trestle table in the common hall. Silence broken only by the chink of gold coins as they were slowly, deliberately stacked in a neat, glittering column. Brandon smiled wolfishly as he placed his bet, money taken from his winnings after coming second in the seven-sided melee. 30 gold dragons on Sakshad Barristan Salmi. Jon looked to Ned, who was conferring with Robert Baratheon, getting the young Storm Lord's opinion on who would triumph at the jousts. Even when the muttering stopped, Ned looked conflicted. If he was hoping the others would help sway him, he would be disappointed. His vacillating was met with impatient stares from Ben, Elia, and Jon himself. Every time it seemed he had made up his mind, he withdrew his coin-clutching hands and prevaricated once more. "If I bet on Ser Barristan, I still make a loss," he complained despairingly. Robert reached over Ned and staked his own bets. "There's no way Salmi's going to let Rhaegar win, just because he's the crown prince, and no one's better than Salmi. It's a safe bet, Ned. Here, I'll meet Brandon's 30 gold dragons." "Well then," Lyanna declared, grinning and proffering a single silver coin. She clinched the silver between her middle fingers, holding it up for all to see. "I bet this solitary silver coin on Prince Rhaegar. Minimum stake, maximum returns, boys. That's how it's done." "What?" Robert choked, looking scandalized. "That's just tactical thinking," Lyanna finished the sentence for him. "Now that really is what I call a safe bet." Jon had a feeling that that wasn't quite what Robert was going to say, but before anything else could be said, Ned placed his own bet. 1 silver coin on Ser Barristan. "Sell me. Either way, one of us will win big. Hang on a minute, Brandon spluttered. This should up the stakes, Jon cut in, placing all his winnings from the archery contest on the table. Immediately, the others fell silent as they gaped at his stake. All of that on Prince Rhaegar to win. Jon, are you insane? That's all your money, Lyanna stated, still gaping at the sack of gold. Benjen, who had been taking a written record of the bets, stopped writing and turned to look at Jon uncertainly. Ben, write it down, Jon instructed him. I'm being serious. All that on Prince Rhaegar. Lyanna looked as if she was going to protest again, but Brandon drowned her out as he raised his own stakes. Another 10 gold dragons on Sir Barristan Selmy. Immediately, Benjen scratched out the old bet and scribbled the new one in its place, just as Robert Baratheon, never to be outdone, did the same. Jon grinned as he watched their pride being piqued. He could tell them he already knew the outcome, but they'd never believe him. On your heads be it, he warned them. Lyanna sighed heavily as she rose from her seat, ready to return to the stands. You are all insane, but it's not as if anyone ever listens to me. Leaving the gold with Benjen, who was acting as a neutral arbitrator, Jon caught up with his aunt as she made her way across the yard. The stands in the tilt yard were already packed for the grand finale. Jon could hear their voices rising in waves in the distance. By the sounds of things, the two competitors had already entered the list, and now the three-headed dragon fluttered from every stand and pillar in sight. Despite Sir Barristan being the hot favorite to win, no one wanted to be seen supporting anyone other than Prince Rhaegar. In the meantime, when Lyanna did not slow down to let him catch her up, Jon had to reach out and catch her by the arm. Are you angry with me? He asked, once he had her attention. Lyanna offered him a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Of course not. It's your money. You can do with it as you will. She shrugged him off and was about to walk away again before she realized she could not stop herself. But you do realize, if Rhaegar loses, you will lose everything. You'll be penniless, and it will be your own fault. Chastened, he realized how it looked. But he knew what he knew, and he couldn't pass up an opportunity to swell their coffers. Lozier, believe me. Please, Rhaegar isn't going to lose. Lyanna frowned. You heard what Robert said. Barristan won't let Rhaegar win. I heard, he cut her off. And there's something else you need to know. When Rhaegar wins, you need to get out of the stands as fast as you can. Whatever for, she retorted sharply. If you're going to be all vague with your silly veiled warnings again, I'll just leave you standing here to scowl by yourself. Stung by the criticism, Jon replied without even thinking, because he's planning to crown you the queen of love and beauty. Whatever it was she was expecting him to say, it clearly wasn't that. Taken aback, her mouth wordlessly flapped as she gathered her wits. Don't be silly, Princess Yug will be there. He wouldn't humiliate her in public by choosing another woman. But he will, Jon insisted. I heard someone talking about it. You also heard someone saying he's a rapist. And look how that turned out, she chided. Now enough of this, Jon. You clearly have a grudge against the prince, and you need to let it go. With that, she turned her back and walked away in long, purposeful strides. A few seconds later, when he did not follow, she turned around so the wind was at her back and fanning her hair over her face. Are you coming or not? Of course, he murmured unenthusiastically. Lyanna emphasized her displeasure by seating herself between Brandon and Robert, a good 3 seats down from him. He tried to catch her eye, but she stared pointedly out over the tilt yard. Giving up, he relaxed as best he could in his seat, grateful that we're front row and their view unimpeded. Meanwhile, the crowds broke out into rapturous applause as Sir Barristan and Prince Rhaegar faced each other from opposite ends of the list. Despite upsetting his aunt, Jon soon lost himself in the joust. A hushed silence soon fell as the huge horses, normally used in war, stamped their restless hooves in the sand. It was impossible to discern the features of either men once they dropped their visors and couched their lances. But Prince Rhaegar stood out in his black enameled armor, adorned with glittering red rubies. Over his shoulders, he wore a fine cape of scarlet that billowed in the slipstream as his destrier galloped down the list. Sir Barristan was a white blur as he charged to meet his opponent, lances shattering on impact and sending showers of splinters spinning all round them. Jon held his breath as both riders seemed thrown from their saddles, but Rhaegar clung on where Sir Barristan just slipped over the horse's neck. He hit the ground in a crunch of impacting metal and rolled over and over. The prince's victory was heralded with a roar from the crowds and a huge sigh of relief from Jon. Forgetting what was yet to come, he couldn't resist making eye contact with his uncle Brandon and Robert Baratheon, seething at the loss of so much gold. At least Ned wasn't too bothered by the loss of his solitary silver coin. Even Lyanna, still pale and shaky with relief, looked at him a little more softly now. A smile was only just teasing the corners of her mouth. He rose from his seat to speak with her again. "Are you sure you haven't had enough?" "No," she replied firmly. "Princess Elia is right behind me. He wouldn't humiliate her so publicly. He's not like that." Jon, still kneeling in front of his aunt, glanced up to where Elia was on her feet and smiling jubilantly and applauding eagerly. Asha Dane was with her, whispering in her ear, while her worried eyes rested on Sar Barristan being carried away to the sidelines. Elia nodded, at which Ashara hurried away, dabbing her eyes with a silk favor. "Jon," Lyanna's voice brought him back into the present. "Go and sit down. You worry too much." She was trying to be reassuring, but it didn't work. By the time he got back to his seat, Rosier had finished his victory lap of the stands, and now had the laurel in his hands. Jon could see the blue winter roses made vivid to the point of gaudiness in the afternoon sunshine. He watched, as if in someone else's bad dream, as the stands fell silent and the prince rode past his princess, leaving her standing there empty-handed. It was in front of Lyanna that he reined up, all eyes in the stands turning to her. "I would crown you, Lady Stark, as my queen of love and beauty," the prince declared. No one cheered. No one applauded. Lyanna kept her gaze fixed on her lap, her face burning bright red in shame. Next to Jon, Ned couldn't look. He averted his gaze in horror, while Robert Baratheon looked like he wanted to punch the prince. But Lyanna had no choice. There was no way to back out without humiliating one of the most powerful men in the realm and causing a fuss in the process. Stiffly, awkwardly, she had to get up and accept the wreath of winter roses. Jon watched her carefully. As Racker placed the wreath on her head, she turned to look at him. Jon, her eyes wide with shock and fear. After several agonizing moments, the silence was broken by Elia's footsteps, as she left the stands alone. Despite the harsh conditions, the campfire was warm and snug. Wherever they set up camp, it was always sheltered by ridges and hills, beneath the canopy of the haunted forest. At nights, they huddled around the fire for warmth, and Tormund told them stories. Some true, some Sansa suspected he had made up on the spot. "Once I fucked a bear," he insisted. She listened all the same. Not soon after setting out, she had seen a shadow cat. It moved like smoke made flesh, soundless and graceful as it swept down the hillside and vanished into the darkness of the trees. She tried to follow it, to get a second glance, then remembered that even direwolves feared shadow cats. It was as she turned back to return to camp that she saw her first dead man walking. She stood stunned and rooted to the spot as the thing lurched toward her with its guts hanging from a wound in the belly. She met its ice-blue eyes and screamed so loud the birds took flight from the trees overheard. Seconds later, a burning arrow whizzed past her head and hit the white straight through the heart. Startled all over again, she spun on her heels to where a brother of the Night's Watch lowered his bow, standing on a natural ledge in the forest. Satisfied the thing was dead, he lowered his bow and gave Sansa a nod. "Thank you," she stammered up at the man. Her knees felt weak as water. "You are lucky, my lady. They normally travel in packs." She regained her breath and scanned the forest surrounding her, dreading the sight of more of those undead creatures. Mercifully, that one was a lone wolf, and gone the way of all lone wolves. But they did not keep her waiting for long. It was as they set up camp past the Skirling Pass that the attack came. Scores of them, from all directions, moving at a breathtaking speed. Brienne and Tormund were the first in line. Weapons drawn ward them off. Pod had pulled her down a small ravine to get out of harm's way. The pair of them rolling down the incline, but no longer willing to stand around screaming, Sansa hauled herself back up and tried to fight them off with a burning tree branch pulled from the campfire. Brienne cut the arm off one of them, and it landed at Sansa's feet. She watched in horror as its hand continued clenching and unclenching, the decayed muscle going into spasm as it squirmed around in the snow. Without thinking, she screamed and plunged her burning branch down on the flesh, where it sizzled before falling limp. They tried to retreat farther up the pass, wielding burning branches and torches, as well as swords. Their guide from the watch fired arrows in all directions, too fast for Sansa to see. Melisandre muttered something in a foreign language that Sansa could not understand. Then, seconds later, a fire blazed as Rhaenyra came to her rescue. She didn't know what to make of the Red Woman's strange god, but if he got them out of this pass, she decided she didn't mind him one bit. It warded off the Whites attacking from the south, but Sansa turned to run and found more advancing from the north. Before she could cry out and fling her burning branch, a giant elk burst through the ranks. On its back, a man swathed in black swung what looked to her like a burning morning star. Whoever he was, he cut a path through the undead that gave the others time to finish them off. Brienne and Tormund led the way once more, swinging their weapons and cutting through their attackers before pushing them back into Melisandre's flames. Breathless and dazed, she watched the man riding the elk. It was an unconventional mount, she thought, but he had saved their lives, she was sure of it. Once more rooted to the spot. She wanted the elk settle and the man slide down from its back. He was swathed all in black, even with a woolen black scarf over his face. Meanwhile, with the Whites all dispatched, the others formed up behind her. "My lady," he could still he hostile, Brienne whispered in her ear. "He saved our lives," Sansa pointed out. But she knew Brienne would be failing in her duties if she did not warn her of possible danger. Pod, ever fearful, shivered as he rejoined the company. As always, Mel wasn't afraid of anyone. But Brienne had her sword drawn. "We give thanks, sire," she said to the stranger. "More so, if you would show yourself." At first the man didn't seem to hear, but he lowered his hood and removed his scarf, before turning to Sansa, so they could see each other properly. She could scarce believe her own two eyes anymore. With a gasp of shock, she stepped closer to him, shrugging off Brienne's protective arm as she went. "Hello, niece," he said. "Uncle Benjen." She closed the gap between them in one leap and threw her arms around him. "We thought you were dead." Sansa gazed into the new campfire as she spoke. "Father got word of your disappearance just before he tried to flee King's Landing." Speaking of her father again made tears well in her eyes. She looked up at the starry night sky above, as if tilting her head back would be enough to stop her grief from spilling over. Poor Benjen, she thought. He had no idea of all the woes that had befallen the Starks since last they met, nor did she wish to burden him when he had clearly been to hell and back himself. His skin was paler, eyes red-rimmed and his cheeks hollow. But he was still unmistakably Uncle Benjen. "I thought I was," he confessed, pressing a horn of ale into her hands. "I was hit by one of those creatures, but the children found me, saved me, before I turned into one of those things." Sansa looked back at him, breathing a sigh of relief. It was clear to her that something awful had happened, but hadn't dared ask exactly what. "Then you can come home with us." "Not quite," he cut her off, shaking his head sadly. He met her gaze and gave a curious smile. "Of all people, you're among the very last, if not the very last, I would expect to run into out here. Last I saw you. You were a little girl off to make her debut at court, full of hope and dreams." "That stupid little girl really is dead," she stated, flatly and firmly. "She's dead, and she'll never be resurrected, like one of those monsters." A log on the fire sputtered, sending up a shower of red sparks. She was grateful for the warmth as she recalled the horrors of the last few years. She knew he had to know the truth. "Father is dead," she said, softly. She could not bring herself to look at him, but she heard his muffled grunt of pain. After a pause, she looked from the tail of her eye to where he gazed into the flames, silent with grief. "So is my mother. So is Rob. For all I know, so is Arya. Jon is comatose, but breathing. We've lost Winterfell to the Boltons. We've lost everything." Benjen's breathing became labored, as he took in all that had happened, but he remained stoic, composed. "How?" he began, then faltered. "What happened?" She recounted everything as best she knew it. Meanwhile, Brienne, ever protective, watched from a distance. She began with her father's death, then Rob's and her mother's. Then Jon being made Lord Commander and the betrayal of his brothers. It was like the floodgates had opened as she relayed everything. When she finished, she felt flat and empty. "But Bran is still out here somewhere," she added. "I have to find him. If I don't find him, the Boltons will come to Castle Black to drag me back to Winterfell." Benjen cut her off, pressing one cold finger to her lips. "That won't happen," he assured her. "I know where Bran is. I know where the three-eyed raven is. I'll get you there safely. I promise. The doors opened with an almighty crash. Alarmed, Rosier spun on his heels to where Lyanna was striding down the aisle towards him, anger flashing in her dark gray eyes. She tore the wreath of roses from her head, heedless of the thorns snagging in her dark hair, then slammed it into his chest as they met. Bright blue petals smashed into his red cloak, staining it darkly. Staggering back to absorb the impact of the blow, he braced himself for the oncoming rebuke. "How dare you disgrace me so publicly?" she spat, venom dripping from her tone. "I will never ever live down the shame you just brought upon me." "I didn't think." "No, you didn't think," she concurred, stepping back. "Gods of mercy, I will be the scandal of all Westeros and across the narrow sea." Whatever servants and attendants were left had the good sense to discreetly leave, soft-footed as they were. Rodiero saw that Lyanna had noticed and was watching the side door click closed. Once they were alone, tears welled in her eyes, and he tried to put his arm around her. Only she shrugged him off with a forceful shove to the chest. "Don't," she hissed. "Don't you touch me." He felt the heat rising in his face, shame and guilt. Why had he done it? He had wanted to see his father, enraged. He wanted to see Axley spitting wildfire at him. He had played politics, fits them all, now regret came dripping bitterly into his life. To give her space, he busied himself with pouring them each a glass of wine. Why had he done it? He could scarce remember. "Forgive me." "Why should I?" she demanded. He gave her a glass of wine. A fine arbor gold, she took it in her shaking hands, looked at it and then back at him before tossing the contents over his tunic. "I cannot be seen talking to you now," she snapped before he could say anything. "I was a foolish girl, swooning over you like a lackwit. You're a married man and I'm betrothed." "I gave you flowers," he snapped, finally reaching the end of his tether. "What will that drunken elf give you? 2 black eyes and a split lip, I would wager." Anger flashed in her eyes once more as she yelled back, Don't you try and justify this. I would thank you to leave me in peace. From now on," she turned on her heels and began stalking away again. "Lyanna, please." His pleas were answered by the double doors slamming behind her back, sending up another shower of dust motes that sparkled in the light of the spring sunshine. All warmth had gone from him now, as he refilled his glass and prepared to drown his sorrows. But as he went to refill his glass, he noticed Elia standing in the servant's doorway, silent and passive. She carried on watching until he set the bottle down again. Only then did she approach, her thoughts unreadable, but her eyes full of sadness. The sight of her made him wish she would rage like Lyanna had. Anything was better than this silent pain. Barely an inch from him, she came to a halt and looked him dead in the eye. Inwardly, he pleaded with her to say something, anything to appease the guilt he felt over her now. Then, quick as a viper, she struck. The back of her hand connected with his cheek in a slap that resounded to the rafters overhead. Reeling from the blow, he brought a hand to his burning face. He knew he deserved it. "Elia," he whispered. She shook her head. "I don't want to hear it." He saw the second blow coming, but did not try to stop it. It rang out again. The other side of his face now inflamed and stinging. Even his ears rang. "You knew what you were doing," she stated. It wasn't a question. "You knew what you were doing to me in front of all those people." "I never meant to hurt you," he explained, the words sounding hollow even in his own ears. "It wasn't aimed at you. It was not a slight against you." Yaxlam laughed, hollow and empty. "But it was... You know that, and the only thing more humiliating than that public display would be letting the man responsible back into my life. No questions asked. I'm not a strong woman, Rogar. I'm not robust, and I know I'll never bear another child. But I still have my dignity. I'm still a Martell of Dorne, and I am not prepared to be publicly humiliated. Not by you, not by anyone. I am a Martell, a princess, in my own right. Unbowed, unbent, unbroken. Those are the words I raised with. Those are the words I live by. If they're the words I die by, I will die proud." He could no longer meet her gaze, but nor could he turn away. He didn't want to hear what she was saying, but he knew all too well where she was headed. "Elia, please, make no hasty decisions." "Listen to me," she cut over him. "I will not tolerate such humiliation, and I therefore release you from your vows to me. I will return to King's Landing and wait for 4 months on a chance that I may be with child again. After that, I will return to Dorne, where Oberyn will be waiting for me." Panic flared in him again as he tried to stop her from walking away. Elia, listen to me, please. We need to talk about this, when we're both calm and rational. But she was as calm as a milk pond. In case you hadn't noticed, I am really quite relaxed. Now stop begging. It is unbecoming in a prince. I am leaving you now. Goodbye, husband. True to her word, she turned and walked away, without looking back. He felt like he had been left hanging over an abyss.